Warmer today. Bloomberg memo. Alphabet plans to cut around 12,000 jobs, more than 6% of its global workforce. Sundar Pichai says he takes, quote unquote, full responsibility for the need to cut jobs. You shouldn't need to say that as the chief executive officer of the business that you take full responsibility for showing 12,000 people the door. I don't know what can be said about layoffs at large technology companies that I don't feel like I've already said. Empathy for the individual, as always. I'm reminded of a story from my time at Microsoft. I listened to Kevin Turner speak a couple of times. He was the chief operating officer. And he told a story about being asked by his boss, I believe at Walmart, where he was the CTO before joining Microsoft, to come back with a list of 5 people that Kevin could let go from his pool of direct reports. And Kevin goes away and comes back and says, I need all my people. All my people are exceptional and they serve meaningful functions of the business. And his boss said, I understand that, Kevin, but what I'm telling you is you need to bring me a list of 5 people that we can let go. So he goes away again, and he comes back, and he says, look, I've tried. I can't give you 5 people. I can let go of 2, but I can't let go of 5. And his boss said, Kevin, you're now one of my 5 people because I gave you, a direct order and you're not following it. That is the cold, hard reality of things like this. The unfortunate issue, I think Benedict Evans pointed this out on Twitter at some point last year after Meta had announced how many people it was going to let go, that the headcount numbers after cutting the round numbers, I think 10,000 people that they were planning on letting go, only brought the company back to where it was in 2020. And that what that shows is between 2020 and the end of 2022, they added a massive number of people, but you got to ask yourself, had the business fundamentals changed so much between 2020 and 2022 that they needed 10,000 more people? Or was it convenient enough, affordable enough, and strategically valuable to hire people in order to perhaps prevent them from being hired by a competitor? I think that's the unfortunate thing that all of these businesses are likely experiencing. I imagine someone can go back and do the math on where Alphabet's headcount was 12 months ago, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, and it wouldn't surprise me if a material percentage of the 12,000 people who are going to be let go weren't there. And the same question, was the business so in need that you needed to hire? Or is there some ulterior motive aside from furthering the goals of the business for hiring all of those people? I don't know. But it's spooky, I think. Dare Abajando apologies there, I don't think I've ever said your last name out loud, pointed out that this is one of the darkest moments in the tech industry that he can recall in terms of all of these massive scale businesses cutting significant numbers of people. If we add them all up, I imagine we're approaching 100,000 people who were employed and now aren't. As a, if we roll back to 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, that's certainly concerning. It would sort of make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But then again, these people, in theory, are highly talented, highly valuable, and so hopefully the smaller businesses in the job market will gladly scoop up a lot of these people. But again, aside from that, I'm not sure what else to say. Kevin Somachi, Bloomberg. Crypto lender Genesis Global Capital files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in New York, listing the estimated range for both assets and liabilities between $1 and $10 billion. Crypto Malarkey, where if you go to court and say, we're not solvent enough to, cover our commitments, that you can't report the totality of your financials in any greater resolution than this. It would seem to me to be significantly curious, if not concerning, that the business may have $2 billion in assets and liabilities or $8 billion in assets and liabilities. I'm not a finance geek, so I'm not going to comment on it any further than that. Carissa Bell, Engadget. Twitter quietly updates its developer agreement with a clause banning third-party clients after claiming the company was, quote unquote, enforcing long-standing API rules. Okay, so it's real. Not that Smart Money didn't say it was any less real last week, but the official position is now the only clients which are available to use Twitter are the official mobile and desktop clients produced by the company and the website produced by the company. I haven't gone looking for more sort of specific types of third-party clients. Tool that jumps to mind is Typefully, that makes the process of authoring, scheduling tweets, in particular tweet threads, more elegant, more effective, easier. So this is a big deal, especially for the old guard of people who were using Twitter long before its past 12 months of wildness. Again, mentioned previously, the first Twitter clients weren't built by Twitter, they were built by the community. And that was part of what allowed Twitter to thrive and prosper, I think. And so one could look at the state of play right now where you're no longer able to use a third-party client. You have to use Twitter's official client if you want to scroll your feed on your phone, as a significant step backward or at least a step in the wrong direction in the eyes of many of those people. For many years, I used Twitter using third-party clients. All that said, one of the most significant differences between third-party Twitter clients and first-party client is the third-party clients didn't show advertising. Some of them showed advertising that was placed there by the developer of the third-party client, but they weren't hooked into the ad-serving apparatus that Twitter, the business, has built over the years. And I don't relish being in this position, but I'm inclined to agree with Twitter's leadership, with Elon. This thing, the internet's chat room, needs advertising revenue in order to continue being a going concern. You can have whatever feelings you want about that. You can poke fun at charging for premium features that are bundled up into the Twitter Blue product. You can wave your, mission-saving business plan for how to allow enterprises to pay a significant premium to use the service and access the network. But the bottom line is they need to generate revenue. And to the extent that there's a material percentage of the Twitter user base who aren't exposed to advertising that's placed on the Twitter platform, those are users they can't honestly tell advertisers that are able to be monetized because they're not controlling the experience. Contrast this decision to every other major social networking tool. Almost none of them allowed for the freedom of third-party client product development to occur. Instagram doesn't let you do this. There's some edge cases on the desktop, but by and large, particularly in modern platforms, it's not a possibility. The Facebook app doesn't let you do this. Snapchat doesn't let you do this. TikTok doesn't let you do this. YouTube doesn't let you do this. So it's a bummer. And there, I'm sure, is already no end to the people who have been on Twitter as long as I have, making all manner of ruckus about how this is the harbinger of the destruction of the tool and how Elon has ruined this beautiful thing. But if you want it to still be here, particularly as an individual user, you can either participate in the version of the experience as it currently exists or not. And there will be some people who will wander off to Mastodon or go back to their blogs or whatever other outlet they can think of. That's fine. But this thing is going through a period where the business that currently supports it is barely functional. And yes, there are differences of opinion as to whether it was more functional before Elon bought it or not. It's not where we are. We're here. So am I sad to see Twitterific, Tweetbot, third-party clients in general go away? Yeah, absolutely. But I'd rather have Twitter continue to exist than Twitter to ultimately come apart in order to preserve this particular capability. And just to put a button on it, if we turn around 12 months from now or 24 months from now or whatever, and Twitter is a healthy, functioning commercial concern, there's no reason you couldn't see third-party clients be made available again. Though I would be shocked in that version of the future if those clients weren't forced to inject the same advertising tech that the first party client does. Because, yeah. Anna Nicolau, Financial Times. Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings steps down as co-CEO, but plans to stay on as executive chairman. The company promotes COO Greg Peters to co-CEO with Ted Sarandos. Related, Sarah Whitten, CNBC. Netflix reports Q4 revenue up 1.9% year over year to $7.85 billion, $55 million in net income, down from $607 million year over year, 231 paid memberships, adding 7.66 million subscribers versus 4.57 million expected. Also related, Emma Roth, The Verge. Netflix plans to roll out paid password sharing more broadly in Q1 2023 and expects some cancel reaction, quote unquote, before an improvement in overall company revenue. Strikes me as about time for Reed to take a step back, though never underestimate the value of the founder running the business. So this will be the first time that's not the case with Netflix, although the co-CEO structure that they employ may have fundamentally shifted that balance of control. I don't know. The delta in net income going from over 600 million in income at the same time last year to only 55 million this year, maybe that's accounted for by a fundamental shift in, investment strategy, R&D, most broadly speaking. Maybe they're spending significantly more money on their tech stack in order to facilitate supporting live events like the SAG Awards that they did the deal for last week. Or maybe they're spending even more on content production because there's no end to that arms race now that we have the same talent who are producing billion-dollar films for major film studios also producing films for Netflix. I don't know. I just know it's a significant drop. And while, 2% revenue growth at the top line is fundamentally growth, it's not a long way to go from 2% growth to zero growth. And nobody likes that in capitalism. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Netflix over the next 6 months. It's not clear, for the record, when exactly Reed gives up his CEO responsibilities. But once that happens, maybe something interesting happens with Netflix. Catherine Larkin, Bloomberg, SEC filing. T-Mobile says a hacker stole the data of around 37 million customers, including names, addresses, and phone numbers, but not passwords, social security numbers, or credit cards. I suppose it's the only move you have if you're T-Mobile's PR team to specify that these elements of PII, personally identifiable information, if I remember, were not released to the wild, just these ones. That said, anyone who's even vaguely versed in data breaches understands that while some of those strings of information are certainly more valuable in isolation than other ones, right? I'd rather have my phone number out in the wild than my social security number. It's still a significant breach. And the partial collection of information that T-Mobile holds about its customers being out in the open, I'm speculating here, but I feel like this is fairly truthful or accurate. The partial information makes finding the rest of it easier, doesn't it? How could it not? Again, I'm speaking out of school, so I could be wrong on that detail. Broadly speaking, this is just an ongoing saga that we're living through, where in order for transactions to take place amongst parties over the internet, the current infrastructure demands that sensitive information about individuals be housed or custodied, in more modern parlance, by third parties who may not have adequate security mechanisms in order to protect that information. It just keeps happening. And frankly, I don't see a way to deal with it aside from creating superfluous or sort of disposable information wherever you can. My phone number is a forwarding number, effectively. Therefore, if you have my phone number and you hand it over to a bounty hunter, they can't locate my device as I move through space. Whereas for most people, that is absolutely possible and strikingly affordable for anyone that would want to track your location. The only other thing that strikes me as a potential solution here is that we evolve to a place where T-Mobile's systems don't have to house that information in order to provide services to me as an end user. And that's going to take quite a while for those systems to improve, which means the first businesses, say in this case T-Mobile's competitors, who are able to offer competing service with a better information security infrastructure, they're going to have an opportunity on their hands. But it's further afield. Bloomberg sources: Nintendo plans to increase production of its 6-year-old Switch console in the coming fiscal year, starting in April 2023, as demand remains strong. Nintendo continues to prove the value of being a vertically integrated gaming company, entertainment company. They do a constrained set of things, and they do it very well. And as a result, they're, I imagine, if they haven't been already, about to recoup their hardware investment, right? The significant capital expenditures necessary to develop the Switch are probably near nearing equilibrium, right? The game console business is about selling enough games that you make the money back, which you lose in many cases by selling the hardware that plays the games. It's a razors and blades thing. Nintendo, though, all of what I said could just be nonsense because they historically have striven to produce the console in a way that allows it to be profitable from the start. I don't know whether or not that was the case with the Switch. But from an end user perspective, how do you argue with it? It doesn't play the AAA games, although here and there it does. Instead, there are games that you can only get on a Nintendo device. And in the case of the Switch, they cracked an absolutely fundamental part of the experience, which is if I'm playing at home, I want to take advantage of a very large display and be able to sit far away from it and to lay on my back on the sofa or on the floor and have a controller in my hands. But then if I want to have that experience away from that large screen, what do I do? If you're Microsoft or Sony, your answer is, if you're Microsoft, your answer is go buy a Windows laptop. If you're Sony, the answer is we made this handheld a while ago. The compatibility story, who knows? Nintendo just said, oh yeah, you can just pick up the whole CPU and take the controllers that you were playing with laying on the sofa a minute ago and snap them to the sides of the CPU, and there's a display built into the CPU. I'm using CPU loosely here. Like, that's brilliant as a device to enable people to play video games, to unlock the ability for that same gaming experience to, and the hardware that facilitates it, to connect to a large display or be portable. I mean, this is the drum that at least I personally have been beating for Apple to unlock with the iPad for how many years now? Like, you have the compute power, just give me the capability to plug it in to a proper display and, proper controls when I want to sit at a desk. To me, that's the beauty of the Switch, and why it's no surprise that they are seeing strong demand for exactly the same hardware that they introduced 6 years ago. Keep doing what you're doing, Nintendo. The block. Crypto lender Nexo agrees to pay $45 million in penalties to settle SEC and US state charges for failing to register the offer and sale of its earn interest product. I'm not familiar with the earn interest product. I'm not familiar with Nexo, but this strikes me as possibly the best sort of nutshell example of what I mean by crypto malarkey. A software business was brought into existence to facilitate people trading in cryptocurrencies. And that business decided that it was going to offer a product which, based on the name, I would assume, proffers to enable people who hold various cryptocurrencies that are traded on that exchange, or rather it's a lender, not an exchange, to earn interest, I would assume, by staking their holdings with Nexo. Um, but there are federal laws around the process by which you're allowed to put such an offer into the marketplace in the United States. And Nexo, it would appear, didn't bother to follow those laws. And so they got to pay a penalty. What percentage of their cash on hand that penalty represents, who knows how material it would be to their business and whether or not it will influence the way they do business in the future as a result of paying the penalty, who knows. But this is the thing. It's so the Wild West in the area of blockchain computing concerned with, I have this digital asset, which a critical mass of people believe is worth X number of US dollars, fiat currency, or it's worth Y amount of this other crypto asset, which a larger critical mass of people is worth N number of US dollars, right? Again, these businesses don't provide utility beyond the confines of that shared hallucination. And until, as I have said numerous times before, I can go into town and buy a bag of groceries and a cup of coffee with any of these currencies, I just don't see there being a lot of value in these businesses beyond facilitating speculation on the future value of any of these things. Nico Grant, New York Times. Sources: Google executives met with Larry Page and Sergey Brin last month to discuss Google's efforts in AI as the company seeks to combat OpenAI's ChatGPT. Combats is a little presumptive. ChatGPT remains a science experiment at this point, a compelling science experiment for many people. The potential for a search engine built using ChatGPT certainly real, would be a truly amusing version of the future if Microsoft's Bing search engine suddenly resurged in popularity given the close relationship between OpenAI and Microsoft. And so, of course, Google should be looking closely at what it's doing in order to offer competing products. I haven't seen many examples of queries targeted to ChatGPT that are similar to the sort of queries that someone would ask of Google. Much of the stuff that I've seen come out of ChatGPT is much more interpretive, right? There's this excitement around, like, can we ask the computer to explain the nature of a ham sandwich? And oh, look, it seemed to produce 4 or 5 grammatically accurate sentences about the nature of a ham sandwich without really telling me anything useful about the nature of a ham sandwich. Whereas I frankly can't imagine what sort of a answer Google would give us if we offered the same query. What I can imagine, if you gave it such an interpretive query, is that it would point to content authored by other human beings, or combinations of human beings and machines, let's be clear, and said, people who have asked this question have most often referred to these sources. Have at it, which to me is sort of the beauty of the search engine in its original pure form, which is we've indexed everything, and depending on what you ask, we will point you toward the right source material. That said, Google has moved away from this over the years in the form of, go to Google and query what day and time is the Super Bowl begin. Google's just going to give you the answer. Underneath that, it will say, here are all of the other references that can also answer this question. But for things that are sort of observable fact, it just presents the answer to your question. And that's where you can imagine a search engine backed by ChatGPT could do quite well. So we'll see whether, checked out spacemen, Larry and Sergey, have anything of value to offer, and what Google does in the near term to offer competition. Dean Takahashi, VentureBeat, a survey of 2,300 game developers. 45% don't buy the promise of the metaverse. 53% support unionization. 91% say harassment by players is an issue, and more. This would be an interesting survey to read in more detail, if only because it's not entirely clear whether we can surmise that if 45% of the developers surveyed don't buy the promise of the metaverse, that means 55% do. Probably not true. It's probably a category of people who simply responded not applicable to that question on the survey. And the same goes for, if 53% support unionization, does that mean that 47% don't? And that if 91% say that harassment by players is a problem, that 9% don't think it is. And it's not necessarily fair to make those presumptions without reading it in more detail. The questions, though, at least the ones that are highlighted, gotta love the suburban desire to keep everything pristine. The questions are interesting, right? What do you think of the promise of the metaverse, the notion of being able to exchange things in between games? What do you think about unionizing as people who help bring games into being? And what do you think of, as game developers, being harassed by players? Those are all interesting questions to ask. I'd hope that the survey results have some more qualitative responses and not just numbers, but remains to be seen. Jagmeet Singh, TechCrunch. India releases rules on social media influencers and virtual avatars promoting content without disclosing payment, adding an up to around $12,300 fine for violations. The fact that we don't have precision on the total possible fine, it's kind of seems unnecessary for that to be vague. But the thrust of this thing is interesting. Promoting something without disclosing that you were financially compensated to do so, is that not a reasonable thing to ask of actors in the market. The infamous FTX Super Bowl ad with, or no, was it a Super Bowl ad? It might not have been. I should take that part back. But the infamous TV spot with Tom Brady and Giselle encouraging people to get in on FTX, or the Larry David FTX ad. Is it explicitly clear that those are paid supporters of the product? I suppose within the current boundary of US law, at least, that's true. Otherwise, we would have heard about legal action against Larry David or Tom Brady or Gisele Bündchen. So the notion of bringing that same level of transparency to social media strikes me as a good thing. The most interesting part here is that India is not going to treat social media influencers any different from virtual avatars. That is important because if you think that seeing a real human being is the only form of social media, you haven't been using it very much. Synthetic representations of human beings, virtual avatars, or not human beings, are already quite popular. And I, for one, look forward to seeing a talking bored ape encouraging me to try a new flavor of Mountain Dew. Bill Toulis, bleeping computer. PayPal says hackers accessed the sensitive data of around 35,000 users, including addresses and social security numbers, in a December 2022 credential stuffing attack. The fact that it was a credential stuffing attack, who cares? Somebody cares, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of people who are well incentivized to care, and we're glad that those people are both incentivized and passionate to understand that, because those are the people who build more hardened systems. But for me, and I think for you, the more concerning thing here is, again, PayPal, a Web 2 business built with all of the tools that existed 20 years ago, are housing incredibly potent personal information about their users in order to facilitate their users to exchange money. And it's important to keep this in mind. It's not as though PayPal is just a cleaner interface that allows bank-to-bank electronic transfers. That's not what's happening. You have a record in PayPal's database with a balance attached to it. And I have no doubt that there are a number of safeguards in order to prevent that balance from being manipulated in undesirable or inauthentic ways. The point is, the amount of money that PayPal says you hold is not a reflection of what's in a bank account. Maybe that's technically true or technically false. Maybe PayPal, in order to run their business within the confines of the law and all the jurisdictions in which they operate, there's actually a sort of nameless, faceless bank account that they open for every one of their users. But I kind of doubt it. I'm more inclined to believe that they just have an entry in a database somewhere that says your PayPal balance is 42 US dollars. And it's really just up to the word of PayPal's database, whether or not that $42 exists. So another strong example here, and for all of the ribbing that I give to the crypto industry, they have the rudimentary building blocks to create something that serves the same need that PayPal serves for many people, but has both, I think, a greater closeness to the truth of what one's balance of currency is, and is engineered in such a way that attacking the database would not result in 35,000 people's social security numbers now being out in the wild. So I'm hopeful that we get to a version of the future where we rebuild these same core functions with superior technology. Bloomberg: the Chinese government grants Didi permission to republish its apps on Apple's, Huawei's, Xiaomi's, and other app stores after over a year of regulatory limbo. I kind of hope that at some point in the future, no idea how to judge the term, so I'll simply say, before I'm dead, I would like to read the true account, the detail of what went into this piece of software becoming persona non grata in the view of the Chinese state, because it's strange, concerning, curious. Curious is a good word. That a business which on its face exists to facilitate an Uber-like experience in the Chinese market got caught in some kind of net of the regulatory actions of the Chinese state and was put out of business for a year. That should worry people, because that's not very much not a free market in that case. But I don't imagine that story is coming anytime soon. So, Wall Street Journal: the FAA says a contractor unintentionally deleted files used in a pilot alert system while trying to sync a database and its backup, causing last week's outage. Okay, it's entirely possible that this is exactly how things went down. It's also possible that this is an optimistic framing of another version of events. I don't think we're ever going to know, because what reason would the FAA have to tell the complete truth about how it failed, caused tens of thousands of flights to be canceled, untold numbers of people to be affected? Syncing data from one database to another, turns out that that's not an entirely solved problem. And I don't pretend to think that if we rebuilt the FAA's stack on the blockchain, that these sorts of problems would go away. But uh, let's just hope it doesn't keep happening. Bloomberg, ex-FTX US President Brett Harrison raised $5 million for Architect, a new firm which will build crypto trading software for large investors from Coinbase and others. Finance shenanigans. I used to run this business, the figurehead and founder of which appears to be a class A sociopath and crook. Would you care to give me some of your investors' money so that I can go build a different business? This is where we see the unfortunate reality of free market capitalism, particularly with regard to investing in early stage companies. It's remarkably affordable to do that. And in fact, many of the businesses for which that is their reason for being, venture capital firms, etc., they have to place those bets. They're obligated by their limited partners to take money and place bets on businesses that they think will have a reasonable chance of generating a return. So maybe Brett Harrison is a totally capable operator, and putting $5 million in his hands in order to go build a new piece of crypto trading software will turn out to be a brilliant investment. But you can't shake the smell of, you're the weatherman who told us that it was going to be 70 and sunny, and it turned out to rain frogs. Why would we trust you to tell us what the weather is going to be anymore? But I'm not a finance geek, so obviously I don't understand. And that's all I've got to say.